West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
First, CPAC is not the entirety of the Republican Party. That's number one. Number two, political organizations and campaigns are about winning. Over the last 4 years, we lost the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency. That has not happened in a single 4 years under a president since Herbert Hoover. Now, if we plan to win in 2022 and 2024, we have to listen to the voters. We had economic policies that were working. So if that's the case, and we can speak to those policies to those families, then we'll win. But if we idolize one person, we will lose. And that's kind of clear from the last election.
Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, one of the 7 Republicans who voted to convict former President Trump. Joining us now is one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach him to set up that trial, Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Good to have you.
So, Adam, I was thinking about you yesterday as the president, ex-president, the losing president, was calling out his enemies list. And I said, you know, I'm reminded what my mother said. My mother was very tough. The Clark women were tough.
Oh, yeah.
And my mom said, Joey, judge yourself by the people who hate you. And I said, I don't know if I'll do that, Mom. But I was thinking about you, and Donald Trump's putting you on his enemies list. I think for a lot of people, that should be a badge of honor.
Well, it is. I mean, look, I'd rather be on the enemies list of a losing choke artist, you know, who failed to win an election that, frankly, had he just, I think, managed even halfway decently anything, since he was an incumbent, he probably could have won, but he did everything he could to blow it, and then now has to blame everybody else. So not a bad enemies list to be on. And quite honestly, I think, you know, what you could see at that speech yesterday was recycling old talking points, just stream of consciousness. And I think it's obvious there is no vision from Donald Trump. There's no desire to paint a vision. All he really desires is to stand in front of a crowd and be adored, and he got that in ample amounts yesterday. But I don't think that shows that he's really going to be any serious, at least growing force going forward.
Yeah, you know, so Congressman, we were. I spent a lot of my day yesterday on the phone with Republicans I served with in Congress back in the 90s and the early 2000s, people that I worked with in my office. And I just kept asking, was this our party? Was this our, how have we been, as the Republican Party, been this bad for this long? And got a lot of different answers. I'm curious what your thoughts were yesterday, looking at your party and looking at what happened at CPAC over the weekend. Where is the Republican Party right now? What's its future in America?
I mean, you look at, wheeling the gold statue of Trump in, and everybody kind of jokes about that, but the symbolism's so incredible, it's perfect. And then I've even seen pictures of people worshiping the golden Trump statue, thinking they're being funny. But, and then, of course, he comes in and speaks, and I had tweeted just before the speech, expect nothing but fear permeated through this speech. And so if you think about, in history, all these great American leaders that have talked about there's nothing to fear but fear itself, or overcoming fear and rallying people to strength. This president has done nothing but reflect people's darkness back to them, reflect their fears back to them. And I was, it's sad, but I tell you, so I put out a video. It's on countryfirst.com, 1ST, and it's called No Fear. And the point of this is to say, look, we have to disinfect fear from not just our political narrative, but we have to disinfect it from ourselves. It's the greatest enemy to the United States. China's a competitor. Yeah, the biggest enemy is fear in our hearts. He just stood up and reflected that. It was sad, but I'm still hopeful that, 45% people at this Trump rally didn't want Donald Trump again. And I think there's a growing number of people out there that see he's a has-been.
Yeah, very tapped into the emotion of fear is anger, and I think they were tapping into that as well. Let's bring into the conversation Republican strategist and an MSNBC political analyst, Susan Del Percio. Susan, did you hear anything at CPAC that condemned the violence on January 6th or tried to stop future violence? And by the way, you can take the next question to Congressman Kinzinger.
No, I certainly did not, Mika. What I heard is actually people praising what happened on January the 6th, showing a party that is just unrecognizable to myself, and I'm sure to the congressman as well. Congressman, you mentioned the issue of fear, and I was thinking back in 2017, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan really didn't understand Donald Trump. And they almost acted from fear in pushing back against him because they didn't know what he was going to do next to him. So not standing up to Donald Trump proved to be disastrous for the party and, frankly, for a legislative agenda. But I'm curious now, with your new video that you have out there and putting country first, how do you stand up to Donald Trump and show no fear? Is it through things like supporting your other Republican Congress members who stood up to Donald Trump and voted to impeach him? Can you just elaborate a little bit on standing up to fear?
Yeah, I think standing up to fear is just truth-telling, right? It's explaining how you're being manipulated. So the fact that you look at that speech, and if you'd have seen my video prior and then seen the speech, you would know that Donald Trump is using fear. That's what we're talking about. So I think it's important. The way to show no fear is just to tell the truth. Look, Donald Trump is a con artist now that's trying to simply use your fears and darkness to feed his ego. That's what he wants to do. The Republican Party has lost its way. This is not the Republican Party that I joined and you joined, but this is a Republican Party that can get back to it. And by the way, just telling the truth and standing alone in a crowd can show no fear. So I think the bottom line is, look, I mean, yesterday at this speech, it was peppered with, I'm going to win a third time the election, so continued lies. And by the way, most of the people in that room probably know in their heart it wasn't stolen. So no fear is just admitting that it wasn't stolen and not going along with the dark crowd because it feels good at the time.
It is Tuesday, the 2nd of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small, scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Okay, well, Christopher Wray has been testifying for a bit here. Apparently, I've had to put myself in a bubble, of course. But I'm very curious about how that hearing will turn out, because I'm really thinking that maybe purging the Nazis out of our government might be a good idea. If you're a white supremacist, I'm sorry, you can't work here. All right? I know they're going to both sides it and say, oh, you think that Black Lives Matter? You can't work here. Yeah, well, we'll see how that works. Anyway, purging the Nazis might be a good idea for democracy. Keeping Black Lives Matter around, I would think, assures democracy continues, because it is a primary element of a democracy. It is. So there. Okay, so what will come of Ray's testimony? Well, I'm sure that Fox News will be concerned, so very concerned that all this cancel culture is going to cancel them. Well, I hope Fox News does get canceled, because it would make a better culture. We all know it. Boy. And also, Dr. Seuss is not being canceled. One small school district in one small Virginia county doesn't want to have Dr. Seuss because of Dr. Seuss being pretty much a racist when he started out. Some might argue that he mellowed and was not so a racist, that his themes and lessons about humanity resonate quite loudly and should still be a part of who we are. And so you would expect Fox News to jump on that cancel culture bandwagon. Dr. Seuss is being canceled. Yeah, well, you know what? You want to cancel To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, come on. They never talk about that. No, they don't. Anyway, cancel culture is just a nice way of saying that more black and brown people voted than they thought that should be allowed. And they're going to cancel that. That's for sure. What is it up to now? 140, 200 bills across, 800 states? Do we have that many states? Well, they're going to create states to keep submitting these bills to make sure that America never votes again. Because when black and brown people vote, oh my God, the white supremacists might lose. The reason they're so upset is that they were convinced that their cheating was going to win. And when their cheating didn't win, well, we must have cheated. No, what we did is that we voted in more numbers than your cheating could affect. That's how we do it. You have to vote more than the cheaters can cheat. We didn't do that in 2016, and look what happened. And, folks, tell your kids, when I say kids, I mean your 40-year-old kids, that they better damn well vote in the midterms, because we need to get as much of the Senate as we can get. And we need to get more House people, too. Okay? So I think we can get rid of a few, probably just by criminal proceedings alone. Wouldn't that be nice? Speaking of criminal proceedings, we will be speaking about what happened to Sarkozy, because maybe France is leading the way on what can be done. Wink, wink, wink. Yeah, let's hope that that is something that we can really do here with consciousness and impunity. I read an article. I'm certainly jumping around, and I apologize. But, these things just come up when they do, and I might as well mention them. But I read an article about Janet Yellen being quite concerned that there's no way, it would just be too complex and difficult to tax the extremely sickeningly wealthy people. 2 cents. 2 cents. I believe on every dollar, or is that on every $1,000? But nonetheless, apparently it's too complex to tax the mega rich 2 cents over 500 million. Why is that so difficult? I'll tell you why. Because rich people like that just don't like it. And they're going to make it difficult. They're going to have a bunch of lawyers saying you can't do that. And I guess the Fed will say, oh, well, that's just too difficult. We'll go after the lower hanging fruit, okay? We'll take some benefits away from people that they are deserving of, but, they can't do anything about it because they don't have lawyers. In a representative democracy, really, it's your elected, not the lawyer that represents you. Okay, just so we can make that clear. We are not mitigating representation just by mere fact that you do or do not have a lawyer. Okay, let's not go there. I know we're already there. But we do have a curated show for you. And we put a bit of effort into that curation. And why don't we tell you what is up? Well, we'll tell you what is up. At the top, well, after being called out by Trump at CPAC, Representative Kinzinger, for one, said that that's not a bad enemies list to be on. Nope, it's not. Some people think that their lives are endangered, but still, I wouldn't mind being on that list. In fact, I think I already am. We all are. We voted against the guy, all right? On the rest of the menu, the GOP is all but extinct in California, and pushing to the right is not likely to do it any favors, but they're going to do it anyway. The Supreme Court will examine Puerto Rico's exclusion from the Supplemental Security Income Benefits program, and actually that was a lawsuit that was brought by the Trump administration, and this is under appeal. And there is a lot of calls for the Biden administration to just drop the appeal. But the Supreme Court right now will be hearing it. And the largest and oldest power cooperative in Texas filed for bankruptcy protection to avoid responsibility for freezing people to death during the Polar Vortex. Yeah, that's what they do. Just declare bankruptcy, and you won't get any remuneration for the loss of your livelihood, even if it was your life. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Paris court sentenced French former President Nicolas Sarkozy to a year in prison on corruption charges. And former Pope Benedict has chided conservative Roman Catholics, and we're looking at you, Opus Dei, who have not accepted his decision to resign as fanatical. Some of us might even call them heretics. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you would be an integral part in helping us fulfill our civic duty. And our civic duty is to resist where resistance is needed, and it looks like we have a lot of power arrayed against our representative democracy, and this will not stand. And in fulfilling our civic duty, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue doing what we've been doing, because what we've been doing for almost 10 years because of your generosity, and we thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. And that's what I do, so follow me at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, my snoozing sous chef is working pretty hard again, can you tell? He's a hard worker, one of the best. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is out of the American Independent by Donna Provencher. as conservative activists attempt to launch a recall election to oust California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom for what his opponents claim is a botched response to COVID-19 pandemic, it's clear the California Republican Party is moving further right in an effort to maintain relevance, but rather than unifying behind a moderate message more in line with the leanings of the state, the California GOP is making an ill-fated effort to maintain relevance by embracing its far-right wing. Not unusual in California. You know, we used to say that if you couldn't make it anywhere else in America or you were too crazy for the rest of America, you came to California. And it wasn't liberal, wild-eyed people that only came. No. How else would you get the Birchers, huh? Well, this month, the California GOP delegates introduced a resolution to censure Representative David Vallado, one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump for his incitement of the January 6th insurrection, despite Trump's unpopularity among California voters. 2/3 of Californians backed Joe Biden in November's election, and Trump's 2016 vote share was less than 32%. Well, that's stealing from Trump. That's how they think. You stole those votes. Yeah, that's right. The motion to censure Valdao was ultimately quashed by fellow Republicans without a vote. Betsy Mahan, the Republican Party chair of Sacramento County, also brought forward a measure to permit the GOP's executive committee to officially back a replacement for Newsom in a potential recall election, a resolution she ultimately pulled back after pushback from her own party. You know, the state Republican parties across the country have been taken over by the maggots. So I guess you'll have to try to get through the maggot infrastructure if you want to run. Otherwise, you have to be a maggot. We'll see how that works for them. Now, according to Thad Kuzer, a University of California San Diego political science specialist, and I apologize if I've misspelled your name, Thad, this is California's version of the national battle for the soul and the future of the Republican Party. Just when the Republican Party in California is showing signs of life, it's deciding to cannibalize itself. Well, good. But as anti-Newsom activists argue to oust the governor, they're using talking points out of touch with what most Californians want. The Recall Gavin 2020 campaign calls on its website for no more free illegal immigrant health care, gun control, ammo regulations, threatening Second Amendment rights, overruling popular votes, threatening Proposition 13, except that's what California wants. But in spite of all of that, what California voters really want and are most concerned about are issues like the COVID-19 pandemic, the homeless crisis, and they support their state's gun control measures by a wide margin. And 60% of California voters agree that immigrants are treated unfairly in the United States. Catering to right-wing extremists has not worked to boost the viability of the state's GOP. More than 33,000 California voters left the party in the month following the insurrection on January 6. And the state GOP has a steep hill to climb, but the first step is to put together a party that looks and sounds more like California. Former GOP consultant and University of Berkeley political science lecturer Dan Schnurr told Capital Weekly. And experts say Republican efforts to remove Newsom from office are likely to fail. While the recall effort could make it to the ballot, California's requirements for initiating a recall election are laxer than that of most states, and Republicans have gathered more than the necessary signatures, if all are valid, to kick off the vote. An election is unlikely to install a new governor. Executing a gubernatorial recall election is difficult and has only happened 4 times in American history. One high-profile instance in California in 2003 involved the successful recall of former Democratic Governor Gray Davis by 55% of California voters during a period of statewide fiscal upheaval, I should mention. That was when Enron was gaming the electricity and energy market so that they could freeze Grandma Millie. To have a recall succeed, they need a larger-than-life figure, Democratic strategist Gary South told the San Francisco Chronicle. There just aren't any more Arnold Schwarzeneggers hanging out in the wings, and I got to tell you, Newsom is not Gray Davis. Lawrence Hurley of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, Monday, agreed to decide the legality of a decades-old congressional decision to exclude Puerto Rico from a federal program that provides benefits to low-income, elderly, blind, and disabled people. The justices took up U.S. government appeal originally filed by Trump's administration of a lower court ruling that found the exclusion unlawful. Many Puerto Ricans have long complained that the Caribbean islands' residents are treated worse than other Americans despite being U.S. citizens. Puerto Rico, which is not a state, is the most populous of the U.S. territories with about 3 million people. The Boston-based First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled last year in favor of a Puerto Rican resident named Jose Luis Vallejo Madero, who had previously received Supplemental Security Income benefits when he lived in New York, but lost SSI eligibility when he moved to Puerto Rico in 2013. The First Circuit decided that Puerto Rico's exclusion from the program violated a provision of the U.S. Constitution that requires the laws apply equally to everyone. Vallejo Madero, who is 66 years old and disabled, mounted his constitutional challenge after the government sued him in federal court in Washington in 2017, seeking more than $28,000 for payments it made to him after he moved to Puerto Rico. The SSI benefits are available to any U.S. citizen living in any of the 50 states, Washington, D.C., and the Northern Mariana Islands, but not the territories of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam. The decision not to include Puerto Rico was made by Congress when it enacted the program in 1972. The Puerto Ricans are eligible for a different program called Aid to the Aged, Blind, and Disabled that allows for more local control but not as much federal funding. After Democratic President Joe Biden took office in January, some religious groups urged his administration to drop the appeal. Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, a Republican who is Puerto Rico's non-voting representative in the U.S. Congress, said in a statement that Biden should, quote, do the right thing and withdraw the case, end quote. Gonzalez Colon has introduced legislation that would extend SSI to Puerto Rico and the other territories. Puerto Rico asked the Supreme Court to uphold the First Circuit ruling. U.S. citizens who reside in Puerto Rico enjoy much lesser rights than those who reside in the states merely because of Puerto Rico's status as a territory, Puerto Rico's government said in court papers. This inequality is both unconstitutional and unacceptable, and the court is likely to hear and decide the case in its next term, which starts in October and ends in June of 2022. Michelle Chapman and David Koenig of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The largest and oldest power cooperative in Texas is filing for bankruptcy protection, citing last month's winter storm that left millions without power, and it is unlikely to be the last utility to seek shelter in the courts. Brazos Electric Power Cooperative serves distributors that supply electricity to more than 1.5 million Texans in 68 counties from the Panhandle to Houston. Brazos said yesterday, that it was a financially robust, stable company before the Arctic freeze that hit Texas between February 13th and the 19th. It said it received excessively high invoices from the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, which operates the state power grid, for collateral and the cost of electric service. The invoices were required to be paid within days. As a cooperative, Brazos' costs are passed through to its members and retail consumers, and that are served by its members. Brazos decided that it won't pass on the ERCOT costs to its members or the consumers, so it filed for Chapter 11 protections, which indicates that the company plans to reorganize its debts rather than liquidate. Let me emphasize that this action by Brazos Electric was necessary to protect its member cooperatives and their more than 1.5 million retail members from unaffordable electric bills as we continue to provide electric service throughout the court-supervised process. Clifton Carney, Executive Vice President and General Manager of Brazos, said in a statement. And there could be more. Ed Hurst, who teaches energy economics at the University of Houston, is sure there will be more power company bankruptcies. He cited estimates by Bloomberg that Texans will pay $50 billion for electricity the week of February 14th, compared with $4.2 billion the previous week. Hurst said the difference will be paid in higher electric rates or borne by taxpayers. Already, Abbott, the governor, a Republican, and both Republican and Democratic legislatures have promised to help Texans facing huge bills. Some consumers have already received February bills in the thousands of dollars. Most, if not all of them, had plans tied to the wholesale price of energy, which skyrocketed when the state's main electric grid lost 48% of its power, while demand soared to heat homes as temperatures plunged into the single digits. When a polar vortex reached Texas last month, much of the state's power grid collapsed, followed by its water systems. Millions huddled in frigid homes. Others fled for safety, like Cancun crews. The state, long suspicious of regulation and outsiders, was left to seek aid from the federal government and humanitarian groups to help its 29 million people. Now, utilities involved in the grid face growing financial risks. Brazos was one of 6 electric cooperatives that were put on watch last Friday for possible credit rating downgrades by Standard & Poor's. Although S&P judged each company's debt to be investment grade, it warned of pressure to raise rates and the potential for more regulation. And Texas just doesn't like regulation. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're going to be talking about the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the race between declining cases and the rise of new virus variants, and new ideas about why the virus may trigger diabetes.
Tanya, we have a new vaccine, and it seems to work. Who made it, and has the FDA authorized it yet?
That's right. The shot is made by Johnson & Johnson, and it works. According to data submitted to the FDA, it had 72% efficacy in the U.S. clinical trial and 64% in the South Africa trial, where a worrisome new virus variant has been circulating. It also seems to protect against severe disease, with 86% efficacy in the U.S. and 82% in South Africa. In addition, the vaccine may also prevent transmission of the virus to unvaccinated people, although data are not yet conclusive.
Now just wait a sec. You said shot when you started talking, not shots?
That's right. Unlike some of the other vaccines out there, Johnson & Johnson's is just one shot, and it can be stored at room temperature for up to 3 months. The biggest hurdle right now is making enough doses. But the FDA Advisory Committee is meeting right now, and the vaccine could be approved very soon. There's some good news about COVID cases worldwide, Josh, but some other not-so-good news. What's going on?
Well, good news is that since mid-January, case rates have been dropping. Hospitalization rates have dropped too. For example, in the U.S., cases have dropped 30% during the past 2 weeks. The United Kingdom has seen a similar trend. And this, epidemiologists think, is really all about us being careful. Less group gatherings, activity restrictions that local governments put in place after that very scary Christmas spike in cases and deaths. And we're all wearing masks more often.
Well, that's good to hear, but what's the bad news?
Well, the not-so-great news is that several variants are showing up that may be more transmissible and may resist antibodies created by your immune system and even some of the vaccines. I spoke with Vaughn Cooper, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Pittsburgh, who has found more variants with mutations at the same spot on the virus. He thinks they appear because they help the virus to survive and to replicate. Scientists think we're okay now, but the big push is to get more shots in more arms to slow the rise of even more variants. Finally, you've learned about some new connections between the virus and another disease, right, Tanya?
That's right, Josh. Diabetes is a known risk factor for severe COVID, but now many doctors are reporting that COVID may actually cause new diabetes diagnoses. Some experts think the novel coronavirus may infect the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas, but this idea is somewhat controversial. Another possibility is that the viral infection causes diabetes symptoms, or that steroids, which are used to treat severe COVID and can raise blood sugar, may be having a similar effect. Finally, these new COVID-related diabetes cases may just be existing disease that doctors hadn't yet diagnosed. We don't yet know what's going on, but scientists are urgently investigating. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation
to netrootsradio.com. All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In less than a year, COVID-19 has killed more than 500,000 people in the United States, more than the total number of American battlefield deaths in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War combined. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that we were endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The founders then adapted that inspirational statement into the Constitution by providing in the Bill of Rights the guarantee that the federal government could not deny any person life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Then, after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment expanded and enshrined that promise, guaranteeing that no state shall deny any person due process or equal protection. But as COVID-19 stalks the land, it mocks the idea of due process and equal protection. Over 80% of the deaths are people 65 and older, and communities of color have suffered the most. The 500,000 COVID deaths demonstrate that public health and environmental justice are critical civil rights and civil liberties struggles of our time, and that there's not a moment to lose. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day 9,300 workers walked out at Greyhound bus lines. The 1980s devastated Greyhound workers. First, the industry had been rocked by President Carter's deregulation of the transportation industry. Then, a bitter 1983 strike ended in defeat for the workers. Concessionary contracts, deep wage cuts, and a two-tier wage system were firmly established by the time contract negotiations started in early 1990. The Amalgamated Transit Union negotiated terms closer to what was lost over the past decade. But the new owners at Greyhound would have none of it. They claimed $300 million in debt. The ATU insisted the company had been turning a handsome profit. Pickets went up at depots and garages around the country, while hundreds of scab drivers were hired. With a week's worth of training, they were soon operating 10-ton buses unsafely. Riders complained of replacement drivers falling asleep at the wheel. The strike soon turned violent and deadly. There were reports of sniper fire and bomb threats. Many charged that these were fake stories meant to spike public support for the strike. Early on, 59-year-old Robert Waterhouse was run down by a scab driver while on the picket line in Redding, California. Waterhouse had 30 years as a driver with the company and had planned his retirement for that summer when he was killed. ATU reported many more picket line injuries. Within a month, the company was operating with 2,400 replacement drivers. The company filed for bankruptcy in June. After 3 years, they would finally agree to $22 million in back pay, reinstate hundreds of drivers, and raise wages. But the number of drivers was cut in half. It would take the ATU years to rebuild its strength.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
On Tuesday, the Supreme Court hears two cases that could kill what's left of the Voting Rights Act. Vox.com's Ian Millhiser explains.
An argument in these two cases on Tuesday. It's Brnovich v. Democratic National Committee and Arizona Republican Party v. Democratic National Committee are the two cases. And these cases could really stick the dagger in the law. I mean, I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to say that the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional, but what I think it is fairly likely to do is to water down the Voting Rights Act so much that it just becomes meaningless. You know, it becomes almost impossible to win a voting rights case. And then states will be free to engage in really widespread racist voter discrimination in order to prevent black people from voting, to prevent brown people from voting. And of course, really what's going on here is to prevent Democrats from voting.
So the laws concern strict requirements to vote in a specific precinct and who can handle the ballots. Voting rights advocates fear that the court's conservative majority could set new and stricter voting precedents. After Donald Trump's repeated baseless claims of voter fraud after the 2020 elections, state lawmakers have carried over or introduced at least 253 bills to restrict voting access in 43 states. Although the cases are being heard on Tuesday, a decision isn't expected until probably June. FBI Director Christopher Wray testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee Tuesday morning on the Bureau's response to various threats after the January 6th insurrection. More officials will testify Wednesday, including the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard, along with several civilian officials from the Department of Defense, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security. And then there were three. No, I'm not talking about the third COVID-19 vaccine. That one, from Johnson & Johnson being approved and beginning to be delivered. Nope. I'm talking about a third woman who's come forward to accuse New York Governor Andrew Cuomo of harassment. In an interview with the New York Times on Monday, Anna Ruch said she met Cuomo at a wedding reception in September of 2019 and that he made unwanted advances, starting with placing his hand on her bare lower back. Ruch said she removed his hand, but Cuomo then placed his hands on her cheeks, on her face, and loudly asked if he could kiss her before she pulled away. It was just last week that two former Cuomo aides accused him of sexual harassment. On Sunday, the governor said in a statement that some of his remarks may have, quote, been misinterpreted as an unwanted flirtation. New York Attorney General Letitia James is working on selecting an outside investigator to review the allegations. The Biden administration is working to give families separated at the U.S.-Mexico border a chance to reunite in the United States or in their country of origin. The newly confirmed and installed Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said on Monday, quote, if in fact they seek to reunite here in the U.S., we will explore lawful pathways for them to remain in the U.S. and to address the family needs, so we are acting as restoratively as possible. President Biden issued an executive order this month establishing a task force to look into bringing the families back together. Under the former guy, the U.S. separated around 2,800 families in 2018, and around 550 children continue to await reunification. Mayorkas said the Biden administration has brought 105 families together so far. The Senate on Monday confirmed Miguel Cardona, Connecticut's Commissioner of Education, to be President Biden's Secretary of Education. The 45-year-old Cardona has also worked as a teacher, principal, and administrator. Two of his biggest challenges in the job will be guiding schools as they make plans to reopen and managing the government's $1.5 trillion student loan portfolio. During his confirmation hearing, Cardona said he would also focus on the inequities in the country's education system because unless they're tackled head on, he said, they will prevent the potential of this great country. Well, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Monday warned states against rolling back COVID-19 restrictions too soon for fear it could result in yet another resurgence of infections. Dr. Rochelle Walensky said that data suggests recent declines in daily coronavirus cases have, quote, leveled off at a very high number and appear to be stalling at about 70,000 a day. At this level of cases with variants spreading, she said, we stand to completely lose the hard-earned ground we have gained. Again, this warning came as Johnson & Johnson begins shipping the first doses of its coronavirus vaccine, which was just approved for emergency use. The approval added a third vaccine to the campaign to step up inoculations in the U.S. after a decidedly slow start. And this weird bit of news around the vaccine, like everything with the former guy, this is just weird. We're now learning that then President Trump and his first lady quietly received the COVID-19 vaccine in January, just before they left the White House for good. As to why the secrecy? Who knows? Other leaders have publicized their vaccines as a way to encourage Americans to sign up for the shot when it's available to them. And finally, it's done elsewhere. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to 3 years in prison for corruption and influence peddling. A French court found him guilty of trying to illegally obtain information from a senior magistrate in 2014 about an ongoing investigation into his campaign finances. Sarkozy was president from 2007 to 2012 and is the first president to be sentenced to jail in France's modern history, but he won't actually see the inside of a jail cell. The court suspended 2 years of the sentence, and the judge said the 66-year-old can serve the rest of the time by wearing an electronic bracelet at home. So much for equal justice under the law. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting the forecast to be nearly the same as yesterday with a high in the mid-60s. What? It's a very, very small chance of rain. We'll be getting more possibility of rain. In fact, a mix of snow and rain starting on Friday. Actually, rain on Friday, over a third of an inch expected, and then changing to rain and snow through the weekend and possibly into next week. So we'll look forward to that. Partly cloudy skies today. Winds will be light and variable. Lows in the low 30s tonight with some clouds. Winds light and variable. Mainly sunny tomorrow with highs around the mid-60s. Winds will increase out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have been updated from the weekend and now stand at 8,407. That is a marked increase from before the weekend. And deceased have now notched 1 confirmed. And now the deceased confirmed stands at 112. Damn it. All right. Pollen is still rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.1 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Oh, I should mention it's very crunchy out there, it being 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 47 and partly cloudy. Rome is 63 and sunny. Paris is also 63 and sunny. Kyiv is 37 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 63 with a rain shower. Tokyo is 47 and cloudy with a flood watch. Sydney, Australia is 67 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 26 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Sylvie Corbet of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Paris court found French former President Nicolas Sarkozy guilty of corruption and influence peddling and sentenced him to a year in prison. He can ask to serve that time at home and also plans to appeal. The 66-year-old, who was president from 2007 to 2012, was convicted of trying to bribe a magistrate in exchange for information about a legal case in which he was implicated. He will remain free while he appeals, but it was a blow to the retired politician who still plays an influential role in French conservative politics. It's not the end of his illegal troubles either. He faces another trial later this month and is also under investigation in a third case. The ruling marks the first time in France's modern history that a former president has been convicted of corruption and given a prison term. His predecessor, Jacques Chirac, was found guilty in 2011 of misuse of public money during his time as Paris mayor, not considered a corruption offense, and was given a 2-year suspended prison sentence. The court said Sarkozy is entitled to ask to be detained at home with an electronic bracelet, as is the case for any sentence of 2 years or less. He also received a 2-year suspended sentence, which he will not have to serve if he commits no new offense in the next 5 years.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Philip Poulela of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Former Pope Benedict has chided conservative Roman Catholics who have not accepted his decision to resign as fanatical, telling them that there is only one Pope, and it is Francis. Benedict, now 93, in 2013 became the first pope in more than 600 years to resign instead of ruling for life, saying he no longer had the strength to govern the 1.3 billion member church. Some hardline conservatives, unhappy with the more liberal Pope Francis, have often voiced doubts about whether Benedict stepped down willingly, even though he has said several times in the past years that is exactly what he did. It was a difficult decision, but it was a fully conscious choice, and I think I did well to resign, he told Italy's Corriere della Sera in an interview published yesterday, Monday. Some of my more fanatical friends are still upset. They have not accepted my choice. Benedict, who lives in a house in the Vatican Gardens, said those who refused to accept his resignation nursed conspiracy theories. that he had been forced to quit because of scandals such as the leaking of some of his documents by his butler. They don't want to believe that it was a conscious choice, he said. My conscience is clear. Apparently addressing those who still look up to him as the real pope and are hostile to Francis, Benedict said, there is only one pope. The interviewer said Benedict had emphasized the point by thumping the armrest of his chair. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesday, speaking of priests. So do stay tuned in at Roots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.